Students, now we will do the rest part of the story, A Triumph of Surgery. Yes, it is given from there only. Yes. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. Now, this surgery word, now you have already heard this word. Surgery is involving actually cutting open the flesh of a patient. This one you have already heard. But second meaning of this word surgery is a building where any kind of surgical procedure take place. So now it was doctor's place where he treated his dogs. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. All the dogs collected round him. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes and when put down lay motionless on the carpet. And Tricky just looked down at the noisy pack. It's a group of dogs with dull eyes, and when put down on the floor, he just lay motionless on the carpet. He did not move at all. He was motionless. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. And after other dogs, they just sniffed him for a few seconds and they just ignored him and they went away. I made up a bed for him in a warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. Now he made up a bed for him in a warm, loose box where the other dogs slept. For 2 days I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. And for 2 days, doctor did not give him any kind of food but just plenty of water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. At the end of the second day, he became little bit active. He just looked around. And on the third day, he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. And on the third day, what it started doing? It started giving reaction, okay, to cry in pain uh, while he heard the dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe the greyhound and his friends. So now, when the box was opened, third day, he was captured by Joe the greyhound. It was a hunting dog and his friends. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting, they carefully checked him. The dogs moved off the garden. They just went away. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. And Tricky also very hard to move for him. He just moved after them in the garden. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. That day, he just notices activity at the feeding time. I watched while Tristan slopped the food into the bowls. Tristan was his assistant, doctor's assistant. He put the food in the bowls. There was the usual headlock rush. Headlock rush is competition. They just try to push each other, followed by the sounds of high speed eating, and they just ate the food very speedily with a great sound because every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal and he would not get food at all. So they just try to push each other and taking the food, but Tricky was showing no reaction. He was not after the food at all. After they all had finished, when they all had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them, and he just licked the food which was left. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. And next day, an extra bowl was put, and and Tricky actively pulling his way to eat that food. From then on, his progress was rapid. He was rapidly progressing. He had no medical treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. So now he was not given any kind of treatment. Just he was made to play with the dogs, joining in their activities, joining in their fights, and he discovered the joy of being bowled over. He was very happy when he was rolled over by the other dogs, tramped on. The other dog tramped on him and squashed every few minutes. And they squashed on him. They put their feet on the feet on Tricky, and he became an accepted member of the gang. He became friendly with them, an unlikely silky little object among the shaggy crew. And he was actually very soft and silky object among those shaggy means with long hair and rough dogs. He became a member of them, fighting like a tiger for his share at meal times and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. And now, what he was doing, he was just fighting for his meal, and on the other side, he was finding rats at night. He had never had such a time in his life, and he had never seen such time because he was born and brought up in luxuries, and he was having so many coats and different kind of bowls, and he was given so much food. But now what he was struggling hard to get his food, and he was just hunting the rats at night. All the while, Mrs. Pamphry hovered anxiously in the background. Mrs. Pamphry was really very anxious, and she inquired about him frequently, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins, and she just asked the news about the dog. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convalescing rapidly. And he just did not reply his questions of that whether he was using the proper cushions for him or he was wearing the right kind of coat, but doctor just told her that the little fellow was out of danger and he was recovering very fast. The word convulsing is recovering, seemed to be something to Mrs. Pamphry. That seemed very a word she wanted to listen from the doctor that he was recovering. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozens at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. She was not allowed to meet Tricky, but she started bringing food for him, 2 dozens of eggs to build him Tricky's strength. And for a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of the wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. And he was not given that kind of food at all. Otherwise, his situation would again have become the same. So, those food items were used by the doctor and his assistant, and they were enjoying that time much. And even they received bottles of wine, okay, and that was the real situation, the happy situation that they were awaiting. It was an it was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. And the wine, doctor and his assistant, they were also enjoying the wine which was given by Mrs. Pamphry for Tricky, and they took 2 glasses of wine in the lunch time and all that. Then we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. And it was all unbelievable when even brandy was sent for Tricky's diet. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. And it seemed it was really very enjoyable time that we were getting enough of food. Doctor was getting enough of food and wine and all that, and they were enjoying much. They were days of deep content. They were days of deep satisfaction, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. So they took different kind of foods throughout the day, but that food was not given to the dog at all. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on a permanent guest. Now, this was the reason I asked you one question. It was given oral question ki whether they wanted to keep him on a as a permanent guest. So this is the answer, because they were enjoying the food that was given by the dog's mistress. But I knew Mrs. Pamphry was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. And but he knew that Mrs. Pamphry was really suffering much, and after 15 days, he doctor felt compelled to telephone her and tell her that little dog had recovered fully and he was awaiting collection. She could come to take collect him. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal. Gleaming black metal means car, black car, and a long black car drew up outside the surgery. The chauffeur opened the door, and I could not make out the figure of Mrs. Pamphry, almost lost in the interior. And she was just looking inside, she was just waiting to meet the dog. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her lips trembled, and she was so nervous she just wanted to see how the dog was. Oh, Mr. Harriet, do tell me the truth. Is he really better? Yes, he is fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. No need to get out of the car. I will go and fetch him. I walked through the house into the garden. Now he just went through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was a little golden figure of Tricky. And among all the dogs, there was ear flapping, tail waving was little golden figure of Tricky. He was a very little small puppy, and in 2 weeks he had been transformed into a lithe, hard muscled animal. Now he has become strong muscled, and he was very active. So there was nothing, and he was very lithe, is flexible also. Then it is given, now it is there that he was keeping up well with the pack, stretching out in great bounds and his chest almost brushing the ground. He was very keeping up with the pack, he was keeping up with the group, he was trying to be like the group, stretching out in the great bounds, he was very actively jumping around, his chest was brushing the ground, and he was very actively playing with the other dogs. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the house. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pamphry's lap. And as soon as the dog saw his mistress, he just jumped from his leap and went to Mrs. Pamphry's lap. He gave a startled ooh, and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. And she was really surprised to see him, and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, and as he captured her, and he started licking her face, and he was looking very active. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushions, coats, bowls, none of which had been used. So driver he helped the driver to collect all the material, cushions, toys, bowls, all which had never been used. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pamphry leaned out of the window. Now she just leaned out of the window. Tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled, and her lips were trembling. Oh, Mr. Harrier, she cried, how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery. This is a victory. Triumph is victory of surgery. So as I already told you the word surgery, it's pun in this word. One word is surgery. It is the procedure where the surgical procedure take place, and the second one is the word meaning is as a building where the surgical procedures take place, and the first one it is the cutting open the flesh of a patient. So it is about the surgery, and this was the triumph of surgery. So we have already covered this lesson, and the theme of this lesson, this is all about the over pampering. We should understand that over pampering is not only bad for humans but even also for animals. So same was the story with Mrs. Pamphry, who pampered Tricky and made him sick. and she overfed him. He became so fat that he was unable to move, and her love and care made him dull. And same is the case with parents also, those who over pamper their children in the name of love and care. It is not in the interest of the children. They get spoiled. They never learn the value of self dependence, self confidence. They become greedy, lazy, and dull in future. They are unable to face the challenges of life. Sometimes they indulge in antisocial and illegal acts knowing that their parents would save them. Hence, over pampering by parents does not help a child in the long run. So this lesson is not about the over pampering of the this dog only, but it is all about the writer wants to teach us a lesson that parents should not over pamper their children. They should imbibe some good values in them. They should make them active, and they should not be over pampered at all. And title I have already discussed that it is about the surgery. Okay, and she comes to it is all about triumph of surgery, and the meaning I have already discussed the meaning of the word surgery also. And it was all a triumph because her dog recovered in the surgery, and she called it a triumph of surgery. So this is all about the theme and title of the story. And textual questions and other extra questions I will send you in the form of assignment. So with that, thank you.